Welcome to HitchPod, the podcast where we're watching every movie ever made through the lens of Alfred Hitchcock. This episode is from our Patreon back catalogue. Originally recorded in November 2020 as the second instalment of a season of Hitchcock-esque films. It's Michael Powell's Peeping Tom. If you enjoy this episode and want to catch up faster, or just want to hear what we're watching right now, you can find us at patreon.com/hitchpod for $2 a month. Go on, pay the $2. Here's the episode.
Have you ever had a premonition? A feeling that something dreadful was about to happen?
Want to hear one of my ideas for a perfect murder?
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Jumped in the play. You didn't know where you were. You gasped, but you didn't know.
Didn't jump, I tell you.
Well, here we are again.
Yes.
Recommend anything?
This is a HitchPod bonus episode. Usually in this podcast, we watch a Hitchcock movie every month or so. And today, in a special bonus episode, though, we are watching a Hitchcock-inspired episode. It's voted upon by our supporters at Patreon. And my name is Kat Jones. I'm here with Dan Libke. The bonus movie we're talking about is Peeping Tom, directed by Michael Powell.
Yes, Peeping Tom, that was an overwhelming winner when we did the fan vote over at Patreon. So that's the one we have watched, and that's the one we're going to talk about.
So if you like Hitchcock movies, you will probably like Peeping Tom. It is very similar in many regards, and we'll get into that after we talk a bit more about the movie. What's the basic info, Dan?
Okay, so the basic info is called Peeping Tom. It was made in 1960. It's got an IMDb rating of 7.7 out of 10 and a Rotten Tomatoes score, a very healthy Rotten Tomatoes score from the critics of 96%. But pretty much almost all of this very healthy Rotten Tomatoes score is based upon more modern reviewers.
Are these more modern tomatoes?
More modern tomatoes, yes. The older tomatoes weren't quite as happy.
Were they
with it.
throwing them at the director?
They were definitely throwing them. So it was pretty much universally hated when it first came out. Caroline Lejeune from The Observer, she walked out from the showing and she said she was sickened by the movie.
Is she the same critic who used to walk out on Hitchcock movies?
Yeah, she did walk out on it. She eventually retired. She'd been doing them since the 1920s. I think she finally decided enough of this walking out. I'm too old to be walking out on all these movies.
Did she basically come into a cinema and if there was sound, she walked out?
Yeah, I think so.
But if you're walking out of movies and you're a movie critic, it's time to retire.
Yep. So yeah, she eventually had enough. Other reactions from critics, the Financial Times, they said it was beastly, presumably not enough finance in it.
Is that where you're going for your movie reviews, Dan? The Financial Times?
Yep. The London Evening Standard said it was corrupt and empty. The Daily Worker called it perverted nonsense. And the Tribune, I think this might be my favourite one, it said the only really satisfactory way to dispose of Peeping Tom would be to shovel it up and flush it swiftly down the nearest sewer. So, not particularly beloved at the time.
No, and also I think there's this massive tendency to, if it's a perverted kind of movie, if you say you like it, that means you're a pervert.
Yeah, that's true.
It was very simplistic in those days.
Yes, but the reevaluation of the movie, it continued on in 2017. Time Out magazine ranked it as the 29th best British film ever. So, and perhaps appropriately, I like the fact it sits between The Lady Killers, 1955. So that's Lady Killers isn't actually about a lady killer, but Peeping Tom very much is. And it's sits between The Lady Killers and infamous horror film The Wicker Man. So it's kind of neatly sandwiched in there.
Yeah.
It was rated X at the time.
What does that mean?
Rated X means you really shouldn't be. It's not for general release. I think. I think it's really that's really full on. You certainly can't see it if you're under 18, and probably not recommended if you're above 18.
What's it rated now? Do you think?
I think it's rated now. I think it's R now. Yeah. Anyway, no Academy Awards for this one, but you can get it. So that's another way in which it's very similar to a Hitchcock movie. But you can watch it via Amazon Prime, so it's nice and easily available. It stars Carl Boehm. He plays Mark Lewis. He's the titular Peeping Tom. It also stars Anna Massey as Helen Stevens, his girlfriend. And she also played Babs in Frenzy, so she's familiar to Hitchcock watchers.
She looks very much like the same kind of girl, the same kind of character she plays.
Yes. Yep. It also stars Moira Shearer. She plays Vivian, who's the dancing stand-in. We'll get to Vivian as we go on. The synopsis of the movie: a young man murders women using a movie camera to film their dying expressions of terror. So he sounds like a charming gent. Yes. The taglines for the movie are marked for death by Peeping Tom. To look means danger. To smile meant death. So
That's
very ominous.
Totally nothing to do with the movie.
Yeah, the taglines are usually a little bit wild. The other one was, warning, don't see Peeping Tom unless you're prepared to see the screaming shock and raw terror in the faces of those marked for death.
Oh, that's a bit more accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was written by Leo Marx, who apparently in his younger days had worked as a cryptographer during World War II. So he was described somewhere that I read as a polymath, which is that's always a good description to have.
Yeah.
It was directed, as you said, by Michael Powell, and it's a drama/horror/thriller.
And before we dive into the plot, a bit of a trigger warning for child abuse that you may not be expecting. It's definitely in this movie. So don't go watch this movie if you can't cope with that. There's actually some really harrowing scenes.
Yep.
So you may not be expecting it from what you've heard about the movie, but there's definitely some in there.
Yeah. So just in general, it's a full-on movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but if you have watched it, feel free to listen along. If you haven't watched it and you still sound interested, go ahead and watch it, and we'll see you back here as we recap the plot.
So what happened? Let's go through it, Dan.
All right. So we start from the point of view of the camera of our protagonist, Mark. So Mark, pretty much this entire opening scene is shot entirely through his camera, and that's all we see. We see the footage from his camera, which is hidden in his coat. We see Mark hire a prostitute who takes him into her flat, and he proceeds to murder her without too much ado. And then we cut as
we don't actually see how exactly he murders her, do we? So we don't know what the murder weapon is at this point.
We just see her gasping in horror as he approaches ominously. And then we cut to the opening credits, which pretty much roll over him sitting in his home watching that exact same footage that he just shot. And so we learn that Mark, he works primarily as part of a film crew, but he also has a bit of a side hustle where he supplements his income by taking pornographic pictures of women in a room above a news agency. And then those lewd photographs are then sold under the counter to dirty old men who come into the news agency looking for something that you can't acquire quite as easily in those days. So he takes a bit of a photo shoot of some women scantily clad, and after he returns home, he discovers that the people who live downstairs from him, they're having a 21st birthday party, and this is where we meet Helen. And Helen's, she's seen Mark go up and down the stairs on multiple occasions. They all live in the same house, essentially. They're all renting out rooms in the same house. And she's using her birthday as an excuse to finally work up the courage to say hello to him and, introduce herself.
And she does seem to have invited everyone in the guest house or
Yes.
the boarding house to her birthday party.
Yeah.
So, he's the only one who hasn't come along.
Yeah, and he makes some excuses and decides, I'm not really that interested. I've got a bit of work to do, but maybe I'll come along later. And of course, he's never going to come along later. So she brings up a slice of birthday cake for him, and he basically thanks her for that. And then she nags him into showing her one of the films that he's working on. So this is where he shows us some footage that was taken of him by his late father. So this is, and he also reveals that his father was the one who owned the house that they're all living in now. So he died and left it to Mark. So effectively, Mark is her landlord, which is a secret to everybody who lives there. He doesn't want anybody to know because they'll get him to fix the pipes or something, presumably.
And while she's saying, show me a movie, he takes some time to choose, doesn't he? He sort of thinks, will I choose this murder, presumably, or this murder? And then eventually he chooses some childhood footage.
Yes. And the footage that he eventually shows is from his father, and he's a terrible psychologist, the father, who basically did experiments on his child, which is the young Mark. He terrorised him by throwing lizards at him and waking him up in the middle of the night and taking footage of him as he's terrified and recorded him saying goodbye to his dying mother.
Yeah, it's
So
awful.
it was all very unpleasant.
This is a very British kind of horror, isn't it? Throwing a lizard on the bed. If it was anywhere else in the world, it'd be a far more dangerous, dangerous reptile, snake, or a scorpion or something else. But it actually was still quite scary.
Yeah, it was more bizarre than anything. It was just like, what is this strange old man doing to his son?
Shining lights in his eyes too, to see what effect that would have on him.
And we also get a little bit of footage where we see that from a very young age, Mark was a peeping Tom. We get some footage of him sitting on a fence watching a couple making out on a park bench. So we're not 100% sure what that means at this stage of the movie, but it will become clearer as we go along. So basically, Mark the next day heads off to work and he's a cameraman on a film that's being shot. And after the shooting ends for the day, Mark gets Vivian, and Vivian's a stand-in for the film's main actress. So Mark's shooting some kind of film of his own, and he gets her to come and be an actress late that night on the set after everyone else has gone. And she does this interminable dance routine as part of her warm-up, and it goes on forever. And so Mark presumably gets sufficiently frustrated with that he just kills her.
Yeah,
He's had enough.
Not soon enough. That dance routine. I mean, she was a ballet dancer. That was probably her only skill, and they had to put it in the movie.
I guess so, yeah.
It
Anyway.
was verging on becoming a musical at that point.
There was a lot of drum music, and she was just dancing around to that, and it went on for a long time. But we do discover how Mark does his killings. We learn that he does his killings via a sharpened end on his camera tripod, which he can flick out and use to stab anyone who he's approaching with the camera.
Yeah, it's like a stiletto knife, and it's inside the foot of the camera tripod.
Yes.
So he pulls off the cover, and there it is.
Yep. And so he terrifies her for a bit, and then eventually kills her and stuffs her body into a prop trunk that is just kept on the set. He doesn't have an awful lot of interest in hiding his bodies, Mark. It's a very basic effort here. He's just going to put it in a trunk where presumably within a day or two it will start to smell. Like it's not going to stay hidden very long. And indeed it doesn't, because the next day as they're filming, her body is discovered. They're shooting a scene, and the main actress opens the trunk for some reason and screams and faints, and this discovery of a dead body on the set causes all kinds of disruptions to the shooting schedule. And the police show up and they start interviewing people, interviewing everybody involved. They're able to tie this murder to the previous one of the prostitute because they have the exact same look of horror on their face. So it must be a very specific
and presumably the same murder weapon.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know how bumbling they are at this point. Maybe not.
Yes. Anyway, so they do interview Mark. Mark's one of the people they interview, but he kind of laughs it off, and they don't really seem all that serious about him as a possible suspect, despite the fact he brings his camera in and films the interview. So anyway, he goes back and he's dating Helen. So he takes Helen out on a date. This is the girl who just turned 21. And before they go out on their date, she introduces him to her blind mother. And the blind mother is a little bit suspicious of him. So after they get back from the date, she confronts him inside his room. She's broken in there somehow because I don't really know why she did, just to confront him essentially. She says that she can hear him up above, because they live downstairs from him. So being deaf, her hearing is enhanced, and she's always
she's
always
blind,
aware.
isn't she?
She's blind. Sorry,
Yeah.
blind. When you're deaf, your hearing's not enhanced. It's quite the reverse.
Quite
actually.
the reverse, yeah.
So basically, she makes Mark promise that he won't photograph or film Helen, which is a not particularly coded subtext that he won't murder her. So that's pretty much all the mother wants. She doesn't seem to care all that much about the fact that there's a murderer living above her. And so back to the film set the next day, Mark briefly talks to a psychiatrist who happened to know his father. And the psychiatrist is basically there to stop the main actress from breaking down into tears, and so she can stop being mortified by this death that's taken place on the set and get her shots done so the film can go on. Something about what Mark says to the psychiatrist, though, does alert him a little bit, and he in turn alerts the police, and they begin to tail him around town. They don't, however, stop him from murdering another woman. He goes up above the news agency to do another photo shoot and just plain murders a woman while he's up there. He, again, doesn't really bother hiding the body. He just wanders out of the news agency, heads off.
It was pretty clear at this point that he was happy to be caught, or he
Yeah.
knew he was going to get caught at some point.
That was pretty much inevitable. So he heads home, and Helen is up in his room. So he doesn't lock the door either, apparently. Anyone's able to get into his room, and Helen's up there. She's watching his movies, and Mark is very determined to not look at how frightened she is, because he knows that the fear is what triggers him. So as long as he doesn't see her fear, he's not going to murder her. So he looks away, tells her not to get in his face. But we do learn exactly what he's been doing as he's been murdering these people. He has a mirror mounted on the top of his camera so that as he kills the victims, they can also see exactly how frightened they are. And this creates like a feedback loop where they see how frightened they are, which makes them more frightened. And that's part of what he gets off.
And also it's a heavily convex or concave mirror. And so you can't actually see your own face very well. It's like this distorted version of your actual face, which was quite horrifying, but not very realistic, I guess. Yeah.
By this stage, the police have found this body in the news agency. I think the news agent went up there to have a look around and discovered it. So they send someone off. They know that Mark did it, so they're racing off to try and capture him before he does any more murders. But we do discover that Mark was ready for this. This was his plan all along. So he's got some plan that as the police show up, he's got his camera set up so he can impale himself and film his own suicide as the final part of the movie. And that's exactly what he does.
It was a pretty spectacular ending.
Yeah. He's basically lets himself die at the hands of his own tripod. And as he dies, the police arrive to comfort Helen, who's sobbing at his death. And we hear Mark's father's voice as the movie fades out. His father saying, "Don't be a silly boy. There's nothing to be afraid of." And then we just hear young Mark say, "Good night, Daddy. Hold my hand."
I missed that. That is horrifying as well.
That is terrifying, yeah. And that's the end of Peeping Tom.
Wow. So much to unpack in this movie. So many redheads. Were there?
There were definitely a lot of redheads. So yeah, I said at the time that if the Hitchcock blonde is a trope, then this guy's got more redheads than Hitchcock ever had blondes. I think pretty much every main female character was a redhead.
Do you think this was because he liked the bright colours? Because this is certainly something we really noticed as we were watching it, that it was unbelievably bright in a way that made us feel like it was more like an early 70s or late 60s, early 70s movie, not 1960. There were still some black and white movies around in 1960. I mean, most were in colour, and most of them were in bright colours, but this was over the top.
It was very vibrant. I think TV Tropes, while I was doing some research, it described it as an unintentional period piece, and it referred specifically to the vibrancy of the colours, which were very 60s, early 70s. And basically mentioned that it reflected the op and pop art movements. Yeah, and it also talks about the technology, which is also very very 60s.
Yeah, the tape recorder. There's like a mini reel-to-reel tape recorder that the ballet dancer pulls out at one point. I keep calling her a ballet dancer. She wasn't wearing ballet clothes. She was wearing street clothes when she was doing her routine.
But yes,
So there was quite a few references that put the film kind of ahead of its time.
Yes. Well, so for example.
So just the older guy who comes into the newsagent asking for porn, and there was some porn magazines at that time in 1960, but not very mainstream.
Yeah, they pretty much hadn't reached the mainstream. I think Playboy started in 1953 or something. I'm not quite sure when Penthouse started, but certainly it didn't seem to be the kind of thing that you could comfortably go into a newsagent and buy. It was so he had to get these little photographs of scantily clad women instead that you bought under the counter.
Yeah. So the things I liked about the movie, it was a very sort of film noir opening, wasn't it? With in the dark alley with the prostitute and him filming, and then after that it did explode into this kind of different sort of movie, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, the very first scene was very, very noir, as you say. I was fully expecting something completely different until that opening scene was over. And the thing I also found interesting about it was, and basically this was triggered from the opening scene as well, was the kind of the meta elements of the film, which that also seemed quite advanced, because you had the opening scene and then you watched Mark watch that opening scene again as the opening credits rolled. So that kind of, well, it certainly put me in a mindset of all these meta elements, and I couldn't stop thinking as it went on that Mark himself was making this movie of all these people he'd murdered, and he was also filming a different movie that was part of the movie that we were watching, and ultimately his movie, the horror movie, was disrupted and basically brought to an end, or at least severely delayed. The proper in inverted commas movie that he was supposed to be filming, and I can't, in retrospect, I think that's what the critics were afraid of, that all these tawdry, horrible movies were going to ruin their proper movies. Yeah. So I'm not sure that was deliberate. Yeah. If it was, it's very clever, I thought. Yeah,
really clever. And it was really one of the first films, if not the first film, to put the audience in the very much in the point of view of the perpetrator, and kind of sympathising with him and understanding that it wasn't his fault. He was forced to do this because he was psychologically scarred from childhood. So it was trying very much to make us sympathetic to this mad killer, which people probably didn't like very much when they were watching.
Certainly the critics didn't like it.
And it does make you quite uncomfortable. And of course, there's been a lot of movies since then in that style, so we don't notice it so much. But in the end, the other bit that I liked about the meta aspects of the movie was at the very end when Helen is watching one of the snuff films in the studio, and we see the close-up of the fear on her face, which he can't see at the moment, but it makes us as an audience kind of responsible because we're filming her discomfort at watching the other movie as well. So it's sort of making us complicit in this problem. The other thing I liked about that particular scene was that when Helen goes into that studio to watch that film, the only sound you can hear is a dripping tap.
Yeah, that was creepy.
It was really creepy.
Sure why it was creepy, but it was definitely creepy.
Yeah, I think dripping tap is definitely this the symbol of decay and all of that kind of. So I think that was really wonderful because it was like a Hitchcock kind of sound palette there. Yep. There was some music, but there was also just this silence and dripping tap. So, but how was his death at the end? It was one of those deaths where he almost staggered around the room before he collapsed on the floor. Like, it was the worst.
It was very dramatic, and his arms and legs were all in very strange positions as he died. It was all very dramatic. But,
yeah, exactly. So I didn't. Some of it was very stagey, and I didn't really love the stagey part. One of the other bits that I didn't like was there wasn't much humour in there, and it was just this kind of campy sort of humour where the actress kept fainting at the wrong spot, so the director went over the top getting annoyed about it, and that was supposed to be funny, but it wasn't. The man buying porn, I guess, was supposed to be a funny scene.
I mean that
was reasonable.
That had a decent gag at the end to close out that scene. So the man came in and bought his porn under the counter and then went off, but he also had to justify why he's in there, so he went off with a couple of newspapers that he forgot as he was leaving, and I think the final line was he's not going to be reading newspapers tonight or something.
That wasn't too bad.
It was a decent end to the. Well, sorry, the final line was he won't be doing the crossword tonight. So
Yep. I also really liked there was a scene where we were viewing. Mark was above the film set at one point as the police were removing the dead body from the trunk. So he was also watching quite often the dead bodies as they were pulled out. That was part of his movie. So he's trying to film the police, and he was watching from above, sort of up in the gods, and all the pens dropped out of his pocket. And we saw these pens sort of falling in slow motion
that
down
was fantastic.
to the ground. It was a great shot, and again a very Hitchcock kind of elevated point of view shot there. So I really liked that. One of the things I didn't like was the plot hole. I thought it was a plot hole of he liked peeping on these lovers and people have kissing and so on. That never went anywhere.
It didn't really, did it? No, we saw like the first time he's introduced to the party, where they introduce him by noticing that he's basically just looking in the window as he's about to come in the house. And I think the mother somehow noticed him doing that again, so she sensed that he was.
She hears his footsteps, I think, pausing as he goes past the window every day. But it didn't. That could have really added. It really could have added to the plot, couldn't it? If he was actually filming people, but maybe the censors wouldn't have liked that.
Yeah, maybe. I suspect the censors, I know that the censors did some serious cutting of this movie or ordered some serious cutting of the movie. Although I'm not 100% sure what version we watched, how many of, whether we watched the exact same version that was allowed into cinemas in 1960 or whether some of the cuts were cuts were reinstated.
When he goes on his date, he's also spying on some people who are kissing,
Yeah.
and that was quite awkwardly handled as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Um,
Maybe they just had to put that in for the title. Maybe he had the
Yeah.
title stored and just, I'll make him a little bit of a peeping Tom, but
Yeah,
that's not
'cause it-
really what I'm interested in.
It is a great title, but it wasn't
Yeah.
exactly the movie, which is fine. I really liked the mother. She was fabulous. She was perhaps the only good actor in this. Her name's Maxine Audley, and it was a very dry role, but she did it well.
Yeah, she was great. To be honest, I don't think I realised immediately that she was supposed to be blind. Maybe that should have been clear from the first moment she was there. I didn't realise, and then it was only later as I said, oh, wait a sec, she's blind. What's going on here? And then I kind of had to cast my mind back. But yeah, she was good.
And they gave her. She was also an alcoholic, so they gave her lots of drinking to do, which also was kind of went nowhere.
Yeah.
It didn't have really a payoff at all. The fact that she was blind was integral to the plot, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because later on, she watched a movie with him, and of course, she couldn't see it.
Yeah, and she did say something about how she regretted, like if she had to live her life over again, she wouldn't let a doctor try some procedure on her to fix her eyesight because he was, it was an experimental procedure or something. So there was there was some backstory
Experimental
there.
parallel?
Yeah. I'm not quite
Again,
sure
that
what
could
was
have been
going on.
explored as well.
Yeah.
She was very astute anyway. I mean, so she asked things like, Mark is in films, isn't he? Which studio does he work at when she found out there'd been a murder?
Yes.
And then, when he's at the window, the daughter says, how do you know he was there? And she says, the back of my neck told me. She had some great moments there.
She was good. I honestly couldn't tell for some of the other scenes whether it was good acting or not because there was a very stilted style, but I couldn't tell whether, and this was particularly Mark, whether like that was part of his awkwardness and weirdness or whether that was him struggling to connect to the scene. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that was the character he was playing, but I did find it a little bit off-putting, which maybe was the point.
Yeah, he played like, I think one of the critics said he played it like a Peter Lorre accent that made, he said birthday and it was birthday.
Yeah.
He kind of had this weird accent as if I'm supposed to be creepy, let's make myself look artificially creepy.
Yep.
He probably just had a bad screenplay, right? He maybe didn't change any of the script and the script was limiting him maybe if you want to give him, but it was pretty wooden acting from everyone or overacted. There was a lot of the women were overacting their parts like a stage play, and that's how I found it, and I find that quite off-putting, and that's the director too, right?
Yeah.
It is a way. So even the woman that I really didn't like in Frenzy, what was her name again? Was it Anna Massey?
Yeah.
I didn't like her in Frenzy. I didn't like her in this one. I found her a bit irritating.
Yeah. Sorry, Anna.
Yeah, sorry, Anna. Anything else that you wanted to mention about the...
No, not really. Do you want to move on to some quotes?
Oh, just one more thing before
Okay.
I got here. One of the other actresses that was uncredited apparently was a woman in a sports car. Can you remember a woman hopping in a sports car at some point, almost in extra? And that was Cornelia Francis. And she was she then moved to Australia and she played in Home and Away,
Oh,
like
really?
the young doctors. She was in Home and Away for 30 years.
Oh.
And she's the woman who hosted The Weakest Link. Can you
Oh,
remember?
yeah. I remember The Weakest Link, yeah.
And guess what colour her hair was?
Yeah, that's true. Everyone was a redhead. Yep, we get it.
So what are the best lines?
Well, one of the lines, I've already mentioned the crossword line, which is
Yeah.
the newsagent after the man leaves after having buying some porn.
Do you think after everyone buys porn from him and walks out of the shop, he says the same line? I hope so. And the person rolls their eyes and goes, oh, God,
Come on,
you
not
say
this
that
joke
every
again."
time.
Yeah.
Not this joke again.
Yep.
Well, he won't be doing the CrossFit. Yes, I know.
Yes,
I've heard
I know,
it.
Yeah. I also liked Helen at one point, as you mentioned. Helen speaking to her mother says, "Mother, what's worrying you?" And she replies, "The price of whiskey." So, that goes to her drinking again.
That could be the payoff for the entire alcohol subplot.
Yeah.
I had a couple of others. One of the models above the newsagent was just a bit of chit-chat. Said, I went out with my boyfriend. Trouble was my fiancé found out.
Yeah, that was good.
I mean, that's possibly the best line in the movie.
Yeah.
And those two models are chatting to each other a couple of times. They only talk about men, though, which we'll get to in a minute. Mark, when he takes Helen up to his apartment early on the birthday and said, I'd like to offer you a drink. And then he goes, oh, I haven't got one.
Yeah. But she ends up getting a glass of milk.
Yeah, he goes, I've got some milk. Now, this is a serial killer thing. In the 50s and 60s, they often are drinking milk. I think it's really, that's very creepy.
Yep.
And then, of course, she said, you're the landlord, but you walk about as if you can't afford the rent, which is also a good line from Helen.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So what about the Bechdel test?
Yeah, this one's a fail. We do have really the only two named women, I think, are Helen and her mother.
Yeah.
And
I think she's only Mrs. Stevens. I don't know that she's got another name.
Yeah, maybe not. Yes, yeah. So her mother may not have a name, and regardless, they only really talk about Mark. So
Yeah.
that's a big fail.
Yeah, and the porn models again, only really talking about Mark and their boyfriends.
Yep. All right, let's move on to modern technology, how it might have impacted or changed the plot.
Well, how did you think the camera would change, Dan?
The camera would be just part of your iPhone for sure. I mean, the problem would be these days.
He would have had one of the most up to date. He needs one with 2 or 3 cameras, right?
Probably, but you probably wouldn't have a camera big enough to require a stabby tripod underneath it. So that's slightly different. So if you had to shoot footage on a smaller camera, maybe on his phone, maybe there's some kind of app that he could have. So instead of stabbing people, he does the feedback and the actual feedback. You wouldn't need a giant mirror on the top of your camera anymore. You just flip it around to the front-facing camera.
Yep.
So they get to see their selfies. So maybe you could have an app which showed the fear of the selfies and somehow enhance that.
Well, all you have to do is turn on the torch function, because that's pretty bad when someone shines that in your.
That's
so flick
true.
on the torch, and then somehow he's enhanced the torch function to kill people.
Or some kind of Instagram filter that makes you look even more terrified than you actually are. So.
Well, that's right. You wouldn't necessarily have to be filming the terror. You could just edit that in later these days.
That's true, yeah.
If they're not terrified enough.
Yep.
I think that would be quite, The other thing I think would happen is, well, a more realistic modern plot would be that Mark, takes all his movies on his iPhone and then never watches them, just like everyone else. He takes movies and photos.
Uploaded to iCloud photos somewhere and
Never seen again.
Never edited, never looked at, never seen again. Yeah.
Yep.
I also thought instead of this side hustle of taking nude photos for the men who wander into the newsagent, he could probably just shoot some footage and just upload it to a porn site somewhere like that and slap some advertising on it or.
That'd be a better side hustle. I feel like the home cinemas these days are more luxurious than his setup. He just had like a director chair there.
He did.
He would have, a
surround sound.
Yeah, far more so luxurious. And in a modern movie, I do feel like there would have been a little bit more, sort of forensic pathology and science behind the murders and so on. We would have seen a scene in a mortuary at some point.
Not just them looking, going, oh, that's a pretty similar looking face to the other one who died. Let's assume it's the same killer.
And it was a missed opportunity to show photos of the face, like to have the actual the police also being very voyeuristic in looking at showing us the photos of the faces. So I think that could have happened. That would happen in the remake.
Yes, definitely.
What about the tape recorder? Would it just be she just blew when she was dancing in the studio? She just Bluetooth it to the studio speakers, wouldn't
definitely.
she?
That'd be much easier.
Yeah, I think so. And at one point there was a speakerphone on camera as well. Did you spot that?
Yes, that was great. So they had a phone call, and they had a device where you'd put the receiver of the phone, an old time phone. You would actually put it into this device, which would then send out the receiver, blare it out via a giant microphone.
Yeah.
So it was like the modern day speakerphone. It was fantastic.
Yeah, that was really good.
Tributes, homages, remakes. Do you have any here?
Well, I mean, of course, we have to talk about the similarities with Psycho, but
Yes.
wasn't Powell was part of the Hitchcock stable, and at some point he worked with Hitchcock?
Yeah, he did. Apparently, he worked as a stills photographer, and he did some other work for Hitchcock earlier in his career. So they were basically friends throughout their careers. So that's a nice little Hitchcockian link.
Yeah, definitely. So Psycho came out in the same year, about the same time.
Yeah, pretty
actually.
much. Yeah, and basically the two do have some very noticeable similarities. Norman's probably a little bit warier about being caught, so he's not got this elaborate suicide plan. He's quite determined to sink cars into swamps, do whatever he needs to try and not be caught. But
That's right. He's at least trying to pin it on someone else too for most of that movie.
We also have both of the killers. They seem to be mild mannered and harmless and come off as these very gentle kind of men when in fact they have deeper issues.
Yeah, back in the 60s that was enough of an excuse for police not to dig further. But I feel like these days you can't put that in a movie anymore. We all know.
Possibly due to these two movies. So just like, all right, we know that the ones that you least expect, they're the ones that are most likely to do it. I'm not sure that actually applies in real life, but it certainly applies in movies these days.
And I like like that there's sort of a bit of a symmetry here with Norman having problems with his mother and with Mark having problems with his father. That was a nice bit of symmetry there.
Yeah, I also got, veering away from Psycho momentarily, the kind of psychobabble that was used to discuss why Mark ended up the way he did. That gave me definite Marnie vibes, which also had its fair share of psychobabble, explaining Marnie's assorted fears.
It was so popular back then, wasn't it, to talk about the Freudian aspects of it. I kind of preferred the Peeping Tom Freudian aspects because at the end of Psycho, they kind of bashed us over the head with that psychiatrist who we hadn't seen up to that point with a big monologue at the end. So I like the way that Peeping Tom left it a little bit more subtly up to a bit of more subtext about those elements.
Yeah, I wonder if that psychiatrist was his father. I mean, we're not actually going to tie this into the Hitchcock cinematic universe. We're going to keep them very separate. Very separate, but definitely similar vibes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they do talk about the sort of the grisly fates met by the female victims, actually, which isn't really true because in Psycho, Norman Bates killed killed a couple of men as well.
Yes. We also have that both this movie and Psycho are pretty much established as the earliest versions of slasher films, which so pretty much every slasher film is on some level an homage to either of these two.
Yeah, and this movie for Powell, people say that it really killed his career because it was so panned. I mean, he was not as famous as Hitchcock, and Psycho, of course, didn't kill Hitchcock's career. If anything, it was enhancing it.
Yeah,
but both of them were against. They were both movies that were different to the director's previous works. So they were both going out on a limb trying to create something new and exciting.
Yep.
And they both did it. They both achieved that for sure. But Powell never really made another movie again. Maybe he was not going to anyway. Maybe this was his final, fabulous legacy, and then he went off to do other things.
And it's essentially more a tribute to Hitchcock's marketing skills as well. Psycho is a better movie, so certainly in my opinion. But Hitchcock certainly knew how to market it better than Powell did.
And he was in charge of that too. Yeah. So in charge of the publicity and the blanket release, and in charge of hyping it up as you're allowed to enjoy this movie. Yep. Whereas it feels a bit like, maybe even the studio, might have had a bit of, well, this is a pervert movie. We can't hype it up too much, and the critics don't like it. Let's just damp it down a bit. Whereas Hitchcock didn't allow that to happen at all. In fact, everyone had to watch it at the same time, and it didn't matter what the critics thought of it because the public loved it so much, or talked about it at least.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying before, how both movies were kind of different areas for the directors, not quite the same kind of style as what they'd done previously. I know that you do find it frustrating that a lot of the time when we're looking for Hitchcock-inspired stuff, that people do tend towards this more horror end of the spectrum, whereas Hitchcock certainly had a lot of different genres under his belt, and this kind of slasher, thriller, horror thing was really only one aspect of it.
And more towards the end of his career, although it does sprinkle throughout for sure. There's murder movies throughout. So it is interesting. I mean, Hitchcock was much more famous, of course. He'd done massively famous movies in the 50s, and anything he put out was going to be more popular than Michael Powell. And plus, you've got the made in Britain versus made in the USA. Different cultures there might have made a bit difference too.
Yeah, Hitchcock's on a massive roll at this point. He's just done what's he done? North by
Vertigo,
Northwest, Vertigo,
Rear Window.
He's completely at the peak of his powers. So.
Yeah, exactly. And he gets the benefit of having done some light-hearted, wonderful, like To Catch a Thief and some of those others. And I think the critics originally, I mean, this is a more perverted movie in a way than just a straight murder, because he's not just murdering them, he's then watching it afterwards, which makes it a little bit more distasteful, I think. So when I had a look at the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, give both movies 96%. More ratings for Psycho, obviously, than Peeping Tom. But the audience watching, 95% Psycho and 85% Peeping Tom. So perhaps the audiences were never going to be quite as thrilled about it. And, we have talked about how there's definite advantages to Psycho. The acting is better, the directing everything is better about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly Anthony Perkins is far more compelling. Like you can't take your eyes off Anthony Perkins. Yeah. He does much better in the role.
Far more interesting and complicated. Yeah. So it's really great.
I do have one other remake that we could talk about. an actor who, an artist, not an actor, an artist who shares the main character's name in this book. So his name is Mark Lewis. He did a remake of sorts. He came up with this art display, a work of art essentially, where he visited key locations from the movie and shot them from the point of view of Mark's camera in the movie. He basically recreated the documentary that the Mark character was making in the film, and that was his piece of art, his work of art. So yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. But I found that kind of weird and fascinating that this guy was presumably inspired by the fact that he had the same name as his character and just decided to recreate the documentary, presumably without the murders.
Yeah, presumably. Although you can make a really good film about that too. I want someone now to make
How meta are we going to get here?
Let's make another movie about the Mark Lewis who imitated the Mark Lewis.
Yes.
Okay, what else have we got from our normal Hitchcock movie checklist that appears in this particular?
Yeah, so this is probably as good a way as any to work out how Hitchcocky this movie is. So let's go through this. Is there a MacGuffin? MacGuffin's always the first thing we check for. There's not really a MacGuffin, is there?
No, I don't think so. There's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing that they're in pursuit of that isn't a plot point.
I don't think so. The only thing I was thinking about was maybe the explanation for his peeping Tom, basically the rationale, the psychobabble, why he is what he is. But ultimately, I don't think there's enough people really interested in it.
Isn't that an essential backstory? Like, he wouldn't have become this way without his psychological torment made him the peeping Tom killer. So I think it's integral to the plot.
It's not a proper MacGuffin.
No,
certainly.
I don't think so.
Cameos. There is a cameo.
Yeah, this is fabulous, this cameo. So Michael Powell's the director.
Yes.
And he was in the movie.
Yes, he played. Who did he play?
Well, this is in the flashback to Mark's childhood. So he plays Mark's father.
Yeah, so that's creepy as well.
It's kind of creepy that he doesn't just make himself a bystander, but I do find that a little weird. But even worse, his son played the young Mark.
Yep.
So he was there tormenting his own son with this lizard on the bed. Like this also deserves its own movie.
So definitely a cameo, which is big points for that if you're going to try and rate yourself as a Hitchcock-like movie.
Yeah. And wasn't it actually his own house as well?
Oh, possibly. Let's say it was.
I think so. It's some of the reports say it's his, the London house where Powell grew up, and Mark as a child is played by Powell's son. This is like an autobiography. Yeah, it could be quite interesting.
Mother character, we definitely have a mother character.
Yeah.
So we've got
Helen's mother, we've talked about,
Helen's
the alcoholic blind woman,
Yep.
and we did have a mother on a deathbed as well,
Yeah,
which
that's true.
wasn't very nice
very,
as well.
Very briefly, yes. We do have characters with elements of good and bad. There's just a tinge of good in Mark. He definitely is trying, certainly right at the end, he's trying his best to control his homicidal urges. He goes out of his way to warn Helen not to show fear, he doesn't want to kill her, and as long as she doesn't show fear, he won't kill her. So that's not much, much in the way of being an element of good, but it's better than nothing, I guess.
And he was an innocent child early on, and that's the reason why he is how he is. So if he was sent to court over this, he may get off on insanity of some sort.
Yeah.
You never know.
Go share the cell next door with Norman.
Yeah.
Ordinary man make a mistaken identity. I feel like we've got the exact inversion of this. He's not really trying all that hard to hide his behaviour, and yet he's overlooked because he seems so ordinary. So
yeah, that's true. And that is by the bumbling cops we talked about before. Often appear. They're not too bad, but they do miss quite a few key bits of evidence along the way.
Yeah, they don't find him particularly suspicious until after he's murdered 3 people. So
some murders happen under his nose, and it's not their skill that stops him murdering Helen either. She was going to be murdered too, so they really didn't catch early enough.
Yes.
Staircases?
We do have a staircase. I mean, Mark lives upstairs to everybody else, so we do see him, the first time we see him interact with Helen, he's on his way up the staircase and she interrupts him. So a little bit of a staircase.
They're not really used symbolically so much.
And a visual sex reference. This may be a stretch, but I'm going to say there's something disturbingly phallic about the idea of a tripod being used to murder women. So
I think you're right there. Oh, that's great. So what about other tropes, what else have we got? We've got quite a lot of classic movie tropes here, haven't we?
There are quite a few, and you do find this with some older movies, particularly movies that kind of inspire a lot of similar movies. So the later movies build the tropes, but this was actually one that created a lot of the tropes. Yeah. So we do have Alone with the Psycho as a trope from TVtropes.org.
And that's the mother and Helen.
Yes.
Both Mrs. Stevens and Helen at different points are alone and could be murdered by the psycho.
Yep. Eyes Open, which is the first shot of the movie. It opens on an eye. It opens on Mark's eye as it opens up. So that's Eyes Open, of course, was famously used by the TV show Lost, where at least 30% of the episodes start with an eye opening.
Really?
So, yeah.
And I've watched Lost. I didn't even noticed that.
Yep. For science! ! This is a good one. This is basically his father's motto. He's doing all these psychological tortures so he can learn science and push back the boundaries of psychiatry or psychology.
Makes it worthwhile. And you can do all sorts of horrific things. And then as long as you end up publishing your work and being famous, that lets you off the hook.
Yep. Which also ties into Freudian excuse. So that's the excuse for all of Mark's behaviour. It's all the horrible things that happened to him as a child.
Blame your parents.
Blame your parents, yep. Improbable weapon user. So that's the tripod, the sharpened end of a tripod. That's an unusual weapon, so that qualifies under here.
Yeah.
And troubled production usually refers to a movie in which the making of that movie is a troubled production. Right. This one actually has a movie within it that is a troubled production because of the dead body that's discovered and the actress who faints at the wrong places.
Yeah, that's fabulous, yeah.
So they're the other movie tropes. So that's pretty much it. So before we rank this with the other movie, we just like to thank our patrons for their support. The only reason we're able to do this movie is because you provide support, and that's why we've done this bonus podcast. If you're somehow listening to this and you're not already a Patreon supporter, well done for getting through our security measures. But if you'd like to become a Patreon, that'd be really nice. Go to patreon.com/HitchPod and you can get all kinds of other things over there. So we've done 2 bonus episodes now. We did The Spanish Prisoner and Peeping Tom. As is tradition, we'll rank them. So which one's 1 and which one's 2?
And we're ranking them on which is a more Hitchcockian or just which one we like the best, or a bit of both?
I think, well, at this stage, it doesn't change for me. I think I like the one which I also think is more Hitchcockian. So maybe we can clarify our thoughts as we do more bonus episodes.
Okay, well, out of The Spanish Prisoner and Peeping Tom, I think I like The Spanish Prisoner better.
Yeah.
And that's partly because, as you mentioned before, I prefer the type of Hitchcock which has a chase a wrong man, a spy element to it, rather than the horror style. So that's pretty predictable for me.
Yep.
And I just like that kind of Hitchcock because I think he can be more playful with the humour of those ones.
Yeah.
But I do love Psycho. It's right at the top of my best movies, and I don't think Peeping Tom is anywhere near that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But The Spanish Prisoner was, I like that. It had a lot of good elements. So I'm putting The Spanish Prisoner above Peeping Tom for both Hitchcock elements and for what I prefer. Mainly because Peeping Tom has that more horror perverted style.
Yeah, I'll flip it. I'll go the exact opposite on both measures. I see Peeping Tom as having just enough Hitchcockian elements to put above The Spanish Prisoner, which I found a little bit less entertaining and also less Hitchcockian. There was a little bit too much shenanigans and secret plot twists, which deducts points from it Hitchcock wise for me. So I'll go Peeping Tom can be my number 1 and The Spanish Prisoner will be number 2. And I think that must be the most opposite we've ever been on the rankings.
Because there is only 2 rankings.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it. Thank you all for listening. That was Peeping Tom. Next month on the free feed, we'll have another Hitchcock-esque episode from the back catalogue, Charade, starring Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn from 1963. If you're on Patreon, you can listen to that immediately, as well as a whole heap of other episodes. We're also about to drop the 2nd episode of Season 6, our discussion on Project Hail Mary from 2026. If you want to listen to this and all our other episodes, please consider becoming a HitchPod supporter. Just go to patreon.com/HitchPod, and for just $2 a month, you can get early access to every movie we cover, as well as the opportunity to suggest future movies for us to watch. Go on, pay the $2.
Roger. Pay the $2.
If you're not in a position to support us financially, that's fair enough. You can also help us out by leaving an honest 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube to help new listeners find us. You can also tell a friend who watches too many old films. Sharing episodes on Blue Sky or Facebook also costs nothing, and we're grateful for all of that. If you have thoughts on this or any other of our episodes, you can find us at HitchPodOnline.com. That's also how you find us on Blue Sky or Facebook. Plus, you can also email us directly at feedback@hitchpodonline.com. Thank you for listening.